Good morning. We are going to continue our discussion of World War II, looking specifically at Pearl Harbor and how the United States eventually joined the war. Remember, the war technically starts 1939. That's when Hitler is able to take power and he becomes the true leader of Germany. This is then when Anschluss happens, right, when he starts to take over different parts of Europe that used to be part of Germany during World War One. And then England and France had this policy of appeasement, remember, which is when you give a country or a person or something, like you give them a little bit. It's not everything that they want, but it's just enough to like calm them down and have them stop complaining for just a little bit. They're not totally happy, but it's better than nothing, right? I said it was kind of like when you have a baby that's screaming in the grocery store because they want a box of cookies. The mom gives them one cookie. They want the whole box, but one cookie is better than no cookie. And the mom then hopes that soon the baby will forget that there is more boxes of cookies. Um, Babies typically don't, right? Hitler didn't just like stop with Czechoslovakia. He then started taking over all of Europe. We as the United States are chilling in the corner and we're like, yeah, not my problem. It's a European thing. We stayed out of World War One and it worked out pretty well for us till the end when we were like, we're done with this. So we're also going to stay out of World War Two, so we don't do anything for a couple of years. And then today we'll look at what Japan is trying to do, what their efforts are, and then what eventually happens at Pearl Harbor. So, we'll just start with this part. So, backstory. Japan in the early 1900s has had a lot of like conflict between China and Russia. There's a war that I just forgot. It's not the Russo. I don't remember, but they have a war with Russia because Japan like wants to take over places, but Russia's like, no, we're bigger than you, and then they have differences with China. So Japan has acknowledged that if they want to expand their empire, they can't really like go to mainland Asia. They try. They look more like Southeast Asia, so we're looking like Vietnam, Korea, Indonesia, like kind of heading south more towards Australia, then trying to head north towards Russia and China. And that works pretty well. The reason that Japan needs resources, um, I'll come back, don't worry. Okay, the reason that Japan needs resources is because Japan is an island. Okay, it's a pretty tiny island. And if you think back to Industrial Revolution, right, if you want to produce stuff, you have to have natural resources. And once the natural resources are gone, that's it, right? They don't just like magically appear out of nowhere. So Japan is starting to realize that if they want to become like a big global world power, they're going to need to get resources from somewhere else, which is why they start to head towards Southeast Asia in an attempt to get more natural resources. Specifically, the one that they like really, really want is oil. Okay. We as the United States, we have a pretty big abundance of oil. Um, so we have come up with a system in like late 18, early 1900s where we trade with Japan. They get oil. Um, in return, like we get some um, products, we get some spices and stuff like that. We also get to just like do whatever we want in the Pacific, and Japan's kind of like, no, all right, like that's fine, we don't really care. And then what starts to happen is we realize that Japan is slowly but surely taking over all of these little baby islands. So here's my super rudimentary map drawing. That's the coast of California. This is which means that Hawaii is like over here. Yeah. Okay, some islands over there. Japan then is over here, and this is all the Pacific Ocean, the boat. Okay, so Hawaii is the like halfway point in the Pacific. It's halfway between North America and Asia. So Japan had been taking over like just kind of some places down here, and we're like, all right, that's fine. Like we don't really care about those. This has been like China and Japan and Russia have been fighting over these territories for a while. Like not our problem, whatever. And then Japan shifts and they start to like head this way. Okay. And they start to take over islands here. We as the United States are like, yeah, we don't like that. We were okay with it when they were staying over in Asia and they were taking over there. We're like, that's fine. You do, it's all Asia. We don't really care. Not that big a deal. And then as they start to head east and they start to like come closer to North America, we start to panic. So what we do, this is now a hot mess of notes and pictures. I apologize. We cut off trade with Japan. And we're like, yeah, no, you can't have any more. You can't have any oil anymore because we don't like what you're doing. We don't like the fact that you're like taking over everywhere. We gave you oil when you were chilling in like Southeast Asia, but now that you're expanding, we don't really like that. So we're gonna not trade with you anymore. And Japan's like, yeah, that's not cool because being an island, the only way they can get off the island is by airplane or by boat, both of which need oil. So the fact that we just cut off their oil trade um, doesn't bode well for the future. Okay, so that's political economic precursor to then the attack on Pearl Harbor. So here we go. So December 7th, 1941. So 2 years after the war in Europe technically starts, Japan attacks Pearl Harbor. Now, here's the thing about Pearl Harbor. I don't know if it's ironic or what, but December 7th, 1941 was a Sunday morning. Typically, at like 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning, most people are asleep. Okay. So we had two opportunities to stop the attack on Pearl Harbor to see that it was coming. The first, radars that's like it's a circle and then like there's a line that goes around and it'll like blip anytime there's something coming. So there was a radar technician who saw all of these blips coming. And he goes to his commanding officer and he's like, hey, sir, there's a bunch of like blips on the radar that shouldn't be there. What should we do? And the commanding officer looks at it and he's like, it's probably just like a flock of birds. We're not going to worry about it. Okay, they weren't birds, they were airplanes. But we had no reason to suspect Japan was going to, or anybody for that matter, was going to attack us. So we didn't think anything of it. We're like, man, it's not that big a deal. Okay, so that was our first chance. Our second chance at knowing that the attack was happening, we intercepted like a code. We had a code translator person, not a linguist, but a decoder, I guess. I don't know. Who intercepted it and like decoded it, and it basically said like, "Hey, a bunch of Japanese airplanes are coming towards you." And he took it to his commanding officer, and he was like, we'll deal with it tomorrow. It's Sunday morning. I'm still drinking my coffee. I don't want to deal with it. Tell me about it tomorrow. Like, they're not coming today. Who would attack anybody on a Sunday? And also, they have no reason to attack us. This is crazy. So we ignored it. Okay, so we had two opportunities to stop it, and we did not because it was a Sunday morning, which, moral of the story, don't be lazy on a Sunday morning. I guess. I don't know. Anyway, so December 7th, Tora 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 translates to attack, attack, attack. This really is where we get the idea of kamikaze airplanes. So in Japanese culture, it's more honorable to die in battle, whether that's like by the hand of someone else or like committing suicide. It's more honorable to die in battle than it is to be taken prisoner. So because A, oil is sparse, and B, Japan is far away from Pearl Harbor, these airplanes had enough fuel to get to Pearl Harbor, but not enough to get back. So they had enough to get to Pearl Harbor, they had enough to drop a couple bombs, and then they purposely would crash the planes into buildings or into ships because, what's bigger than a plane in terms of a really big explosion. So that's where we get kind of this first inkling of kamikaze pilots. Admiral Yamamoto is the admiral behind the plan. The interesting thing about Pearl Harbor. Well, first, this is a movie. If you want to see it, it's pretty interesting. It's really old, so you had to deal with that, but it's not bad. Pearl Harbor. Well, I'll show you pictures and then I'll explain that. So, anyways, casualties. Because, okay, sailors, you're a sailor, you live on your ship, right? It's Sunday morning, it's not even 8 o'clock, you're still in bed. So, the reason that there's such a large number of casualties is because we're just like sitting ducks. Everybody was on their ship, everybody's asleep. These planes come in out of nowhere. We're really confused, so we don't have time to like fight back initially. So a lot of the ships that are sunk, it's not that like it was some crazy battle or anything. It's just that all of the people who were stationed on that ship were on that ship. So when it sunk, there's then not a way to get out. So a little over 2,000 people died. 19 ships are destroyed. It's important to note that no aircraft carriers. All of our aircraft carriers were out on like a training mission further out in the Pacific, so they were not in Pearl Harbor when the attack happened. And aircraft carriers are important because that's where all of our planes are. So by not defeating the aircraft carriers, they didn't totally destroy our Navy. They destroyed like 70% of it here. Our Navy was split between Pearl Harbor and somewhere off either New York or Virginia, one of the two, somewhere on the East Coast, split like 50-50. So a big chunk of our Navy was destroyed in this like 2-hour battle. After the Japanese Air Force destroyed all of our, it then turned towards Richmond Air Force Base, which is also on Pearl Harbor, and then they went and they destroyed all of our airplanes so that we really couldn't fight back. Okay. So that's Pearl Harbor in a nutshell. There's a movie called Pearl Harbor. Got what is his name? Ben Affleck. Ben Affleck's in it. Um, it's not bad. It's made in like 2003, so the computer graphics are really awful, but it's good. The whole movie is kind of cheesy. It's like a weird like love triangle, but there's a good 10-minute chunk in the middle that is like the actual attack on Pearl Harbor. It's pretty good. It's entertaining. Okay, so here are some pictures. That's what I meant to tell you. The USS Arizona. The Arizona is like the most famous of ships that were sunk at Pearl Harbor. I was supposed to go on spring break. I had my tickets and everything, and I was so excited. We can go to Hawaii, so I still have not been. But the USS Arizona, the reason that it's significant when whatever, that's a boat. That's the Arizona. Yay. When the missile, like the bomb came, when they dropped on it, it came and it hit in like the boiler room, which is like the engine, and it like exploded from the inside. So it didn't capsize, it just completely sunk straight as it is. So the Arizona, this one, okay, it just sunk completely flat. Didn't like capsize like this one, didn't go sideways, just straight down. The reason that the Arizona is still like something that a lot of people are interested in is because everybody who was stationed, not everybody, but the majority of people who were stationed on the Arizona, like I said, it's a Sunday morning, died on the Arizona, right? As soon as it starts to sink, you can't open any of the doors, so you just suffocate and or drown. So this is like the final resting place for all of the sailors. There's a lot of debate about like what do we do? Because on one hand, this is like their graveyard, it's a final resting place. But on the other hand, it's a ship that has oil on it. So there's a lot of like oil leaks going out into the harbor here. So a lot of people are like, well, do we go and like try to solder parts of the ship to seal it more? Do we try to like exhume the ship from the water? And what do we do? But then that's like messing with people's final resting place. So I think they did a couple years ago, a couple like scuba divers went in and tried to like fix some of the leaks, so they wouldn't have to actually like move the ship. Anyways, this is a B-25. It's a gorgeous airplane. I've sat right there. Not in this one, obviously, but I've sat right there. This is only half of it. This is missing the entire tail. Look, I can draw airplanes. I just can't draw boats. Anyways, there's a really good book, and I know I say this a lot, but this one is really good. It's called A Few Gallant Men. I think it's called All the Gallant Men. It's the story of a sailor who was stationed at Pearl Harbor. He was on one of the ships. I don't remember which one he was on, but he was on one of the ships that was sunk. Like third-degree burns all over his body. He was given a medical discharge because he couldn't really be in the military anymore because he had to like relearn how to walk and everything. Went back home to like Nebraska, is working at a movie theater and is just thinking like, what the heck am I doing with my life? Like I have friends that are out fighting the war and I'm selling movie theater popcorn. So he re-enlisted in the Navy. And then he was on the USS Missouri when the final peace treaty was signed with Japan. So it's kind of interesting. He was at the start and the end of the war with Japan. Anyways, it's really good. Um, yeah, that's Pearl Harbor in a tiny, tiny nutshell. Um, oh, that's the other thing I was going to tell you. So Pearl Harbor, if you see here with the Arizona, like it's not full. I mean, it's fully sunken, but it's a harbor, right? If you go down to Mission Bay, it's not super deep. That's that's the same thing at Pearl Harbor. It's not deep. So typical missile, like bombs, when you drop them from an airplane, they go down really quick. Like this is water. They'll sink and then they level out and they go. But if they do that, then when Japan drops the bomb, it'll just hit the sand because the sand is like right here. So it can't really like go as deep as they normally would. So they specially fitted the missiles with like a weird box around the propeller so that as soon as it hit the water, it just like would immediately level out so that it would skim the surface and then be able to hit the ship. Otherwise, it would just blow up the sand and that would not do anything. So a lot of planning went into Pearl Harbor. Fun fact, it's not a fun fact. Hawaii at this point in 1941, not a state yet. It's still just a territory. Fun fact. Didn't become a state till like 50 something, I think. Anyways. So, quick just overview of the rest of the war in the Pacific. This is Doolittle. No, it's not. It's not Doolittle. It's MacArthur. This is Douglas MacArthur. He's the admiral. I think he's an admiral for the war in the Pacific. So here's Pearl Harbor. Okay, here's the Hawaiian Islands. While our Navy is like down for the count, we're trying to figure out how to fix it. Japan is able to take over all of this part, everything that's surrounded in orange is what Japan is able to take over. Doolittle comes in with this idea of island hopping. Okay, we start here and we're gonna like hop to each individual island instead of just trying to like take over all of this again and like defeat Japan all at once. We'll go to this little island and we'll fight here and we'll defeat them. And then we'll go to this little island and we'll fight there and we'll defeat them. And then we'll go here and then we'll go here. We just bounce back and forth instead of like trying to divide and conquer and take over everything. We bounce, we hop from island to island. The Battle of Midway is the turning point of the war. That's when we're able to turn Japan back. The Midway that's down in San Diego is named after this battle. It was not at this battle. It was not commissioned until Korea. Fun fact. Anyways, that's your like super duper really, really, really quick overview. We'll talk about it more in a couple days, but that's the super quick lowdown. MacArthur. All right, that's it.